afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you are joining us in another time zone or watching the webinar replay, and welcome to another webinar from Plan Tracker called NDIS Cuppa Questions. And once again, for this session, Elisa James from Plan Tracker, who's the Managing Director and Founder, is joining me. And Elisa, just while we give everyone a few minutes to log in and get themselves set up, if you haven't got a cuppa, go and grab one quickly. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about how your past fortnight's been? I guess it's been a fortnight since we've checked in. How you going?
Oh, golly. Yeah, okay. So it's been a little bit big, I have to say. We've, I think last time we spoke, we did one of these, we had just reopened the office.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like day 2 of reopening the office. I'd just like to say that it's come to my attention that nobody's looking after the plants, and it's fallen to me, and that has not been a good thing for either me or the plants. So we're putting changes in place for that. But no, look, it's been big. You know, I think there's been lots of conversation, especially around this new price guide coming out. How nice is it to get it early and have a bit of time to digest, even though, you know, as we'll talk about, some of the, obviously the pricing isn't in there increases as yet. But yeah, no, that's been good. But yep, like all things in the NDIS world, they move fast.
Fantastic. And look, no team member nor plant shall be left behind in the Plant Tracker office. I'll make sure of that. And just a quick bit of housekeeping for everyone before we jump right on in. I can see Elisa's got a nice cuppa there. So if you've grabbed one, that's great. If you're watching the replay, you can always hit pause and go and grab one now. If you'd like to ask any questions during this live session, we have the chat function and the Q&A function, and the lovely Justine from Plan Tracker is moderating in both of those boxes. So if you've got questions you want to ask us as we go along, please feel free to pop them in there. We're going to pop some slides up on the screen now. So I'm just going to share my screen across. And Elisa, I'll invite you just to let me know as soon as you can see these, and we'll jump into our present mode to make them big on the screen. And I will actually jump us back to the start, so that would help.
Nicely done, Mel.
Nicely done indeed. Okay,
I want an upgrade. That cup of hot chocolate looks way better than what I'm drinking.
You and me both. I've got water, so I wasn't quick enough. As Elisa did mention for everyone, there's been some big changes in the past fortnight, particularly with a much anticipated and actually early release, as promised, to meet requirement from the agency. We've got a new price guide. So we're going to be doing a first look and running through that. And Elisa, I think without further ado, we might jump right on in and have a look at this new price guide. So just for everyone's clarity, the new NDIS price guide and support catalogue, which is all the lovely line items, is the 2020 to 2021. It's effective from July 1st. So it's not in effect yet. And Elisa, I believe we're waiting on some changes, because the big question we're getting is, there was no price changes in the new price guide yet. So what's going on?
That is true. That is true. And look, the reason is that there's been a lot of feedback to the agency over the past year, especially around the difficulty that it puts providers and participants and families into when we suddenly get handed, hey, here's a new price guide with no warning and it's valid today. So that puts a bit of pressure on, certainly on plan managers and on other companies to respond, and it makes it really difficult for participants to keep up with what's going on as well. So what the agency has done this time round, which we're really appreciating, is to bring out the new price guide in its framework, if you like. So with all the changes around item codes, around the introduction of some new things coming in as well. But the actual prices haven't been increased as yet. We won't see that until a little bit later, a little bit closer to 1 July when that comes out, when they get increased, and we'll get a new updated version. And the reason is that there's a Fair Work Commission, some activities being undertaken with them. And once the Fair Work piece of work is done, then and the annual wage review is done, then we'll see the new pricing come through.
Okay, fantastic. That's really good to clarify. So this isn't really a final guide. It is that preliminary, just to give everyone a little bit of planning time, I guess. We can view it as, so that we're not all surprised on July 1. So I think that's really, really good. And we've taken a bit of time to read through. And Elisa, there's been a budget name change that I know I'm excited about, and I think the whole team at Plan Tracker is pretty excited to see this wording change. So budget 4, we've seen a shift from assistance with social and community to now being assistance with social, economic and community participation. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? Because it's
Oh,
very
Mel,
exciting.
it is super exciting. I actually am really genuinely pumped around this name change. You know, what we call things is so important. And really, one of the guiding foundation principles um, of the NDIS is to increase the opportunity for people with disability to be able to contribute to our community, to be able to participate well, and to be able to also participate economically. And I love the fact that this name change has come through. You know, assistance with social and community participation completely missed the economic participation, and now we've seen this change. So, assistance with social, economic, and community participation. It's a bit of a mouthful, but what it says is that actually um, making sure that the scheme supports people with disability to be able to contribute economically is really, really important. And so I, for one, was delighted to see this change.
And look, I'll definitely second that. And it's a huge change. And whilst it may be a tongue twister for quite a number of us as we wrap our wording and our heads around that, it's very, very exciting to see. Now, in the interest of timing, I know we've got lots of changes to go through. A lot of these are price guide focused because we've had a lot of questions coming through. So I think let's jump into some of the key updates we've seen, and then we've got some focus topics to look at, which are ongoing conversations, including our favourite travel one. Just Elisa's excited, everyone, in case you haven't noticed. We're going to jump right on into it. All right, TTP, which is the temporary transformation payments for providers. We've seen a reduction in this one. So I think formally, what percentage were we at? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh, now you're pushing my friendship. I think it was 10. I'm
I'm
not
also going to
actually
say
sure.
I think it
So
was 10, but we'll get Justine to check that one out for us and pop it in the chat for everyone.
that's all right. So for those that don't know, TTP was introduced 1 July, I think, last year, which was basically designed to help those registered providers, usually the larger, more established providers who had to move from Ali Marshall to the rescue. Thanks, Ali. 7.5 apparently. So it was introduced to help traditional providers, mainly, who have been working in the space for a long time and have had to move to this now individualized funding support model. And that transition's a big deal. You know, we want our providers to survive and to succeed. We need them there. But it was really a big thing to move from group types pricing, bulk payments, that type of thing, to individualized payments and supports. And so that additional small amount was really to help those providers to do that. It was always temporary, as it says in the name, so it'll be phased out over the coming while. And I think it's only in for about another 12 months. I'm expecting by end of next financial year it'll be pretty much gone. But I
Great
could
to
be
know.
wrong.
Hey, we will all wait and see, and we'll keep you updated on that front. And I believe there's also a requirement for plan managers to inform the NDIA when requested, which registered providers have claimed for a TTP support item. So good to know if you are a provider and popping in a claim for that, that it's going through a plan manager especially, we may be requested to provide a list to the agency. So yeah, always good to know. With cancellation, so we saw an increase from 90% up to 100% with COVID coming in. New price guide, we're still at 100%. Is that right?
We are. And actually, part of that is a really practical reason. One of the big challenges was that whilst in the real world, it was, okay, we're going to charge a 90% cancellation fee. The problem hit actually at the back end when providers or plan managers tried to claim a cancellation fee. Because if you do that and you mark it as a cancellation fee, the portal had this wonderful approach of actually reducing your claim to 90% of whatever you claimed, which just meant from a logistical point of view, it was almost impossible. So the agency wasn't getting good feedback or good visibility of how many cancellations were really being processed simply because of this business logistics issue. So it actually fixes that business problem for providers trying to claim and plan managers, and also just makes it a bit clearer for everybody.
That's really, really good to know. Nice to have that clarity, I think. It's really reassuring whether you're a participant or a provider in the scheme, that knowing that you can get some clarity around that really just helps in the day-to-day. Now, something else we've seen, which is pretty exciting as part of this new price guide that they've released, is the addition, if you like, of psychosocial recovery coaches. So, Elisa, I'd love to kind of know a little bit more about what we know at this stage around how that support is being added and how maybe it can be accessed.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, Mel. So these are brand new line items that come in under support coordination. So that '07 support coordination um, budget area, it's not part of core or therapy or anywhere else. It's purely under the '07 category. There looks to be a range of pricing. Some of it looks to be kind of pitched at that almost like a specialist support worker, or the specialist mental health worker is probably a better description of it, type end for people coming through and requiring additional specialist help as they come through episodes or recovery type process. Um, the For the workers to be able to operate in this space, they do need to have mental health experience and qualifications. So that's good to see that there's some, it's not going to be just kind of like a free for all, and there's a focus on making sure workers have not just an educational piece of paper, but obviously lived experience working in the space, which is so key. So it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. And I certainly know we're familiar with a number of organisations that will probably start to offer service in that space.
Fantastic. And it is really, really good to see those safeguards, particularly when it comes to mental health. I think that's really important, not only for the NDIS industry, but for mental health as a whole. So really good to see. Another hot topic we get a lot of questions around at Plan Tracker is therapy. So there has been a standard therapy clarification, if you like. And I believe the wording that we've got from the agency this time is that they must be a suitably qualified allied health professional. So, Elisa, I'd love to hear from you kind of where we've been on this journey, because I know it's been a long one with therapy, and really what kind of falls under an allied health professional and what doesn't.
Yeah, so we saw the first move, I guess. I think it was a July 1 last year price guide where we had in there a couple of line items around therapy assistance, and they were kind of vague and often used by support workers to practice the therapy that the homework, if you like, and provide support to people in their homes between therapy visits. And we saw the changing in wording there to be very clear that it needed to be an allied health therapy student supervised by a registered allied health therapist. And so this is kind of a further step in that direction, I guess, where the wording, I'm just looking for it now to get it exactly for you. Here we go. Nope, jumping too far. 88 pages of joy. Pop in the chat if you've fully read the price guide.
You can join Elisa on having had a reread this morning.
If I had, that's right. If I had Smarties, I'd give you a prize. And did you make it through with how many cups of coffee? Nearly there, nearly there. Here we go. This is an important one though, so we'll do it. No, missing it. All right. But basically it now says very clearly in those 3 line items, I think it's 15_056, 055 and 054. Sorry to be boring about price guide numbers to people that don't care. But if you are using, if your funds are plan managed or or the agency managed, then it does kind of matter. And it now says very clearly that to claim under those line items, it needs to be provided by a registered allied health professional. So that's going to probably mean a shuffle for some participants who might have been claiming some things that were therapy, but not necessarily from an allied health registered professional. It's good to have the clarity. I think it'll mean that people who are using alternative type supports may just need to have a relook and think about where and how they fit, and if they fit. And it's good that we've got the price guide now and not just launched on July 1 with that change. So I know we're certainly planning to identify if that impacts any of our Plan Tracker customers, and be able to chat to them about that early, so they've got time to prepare.
Yeah, definitely that communication piece and having this clarity earlier is going to help us mediate those discussions, and so that we're not all a bit blindsided on July 1. So definitely valuable to have. Now, another question that we're getting around allied health professionals, Lisa, is how do I know if my provider is an allied health registered professional? So do they have a sort of numbering system or something of the like?
Yeah, they do. And you can always look up the allied health professionals website as well and look at the register. So if you're not sure if your person is registered, you can look them up on there and search for their name. When it's a little bit like medical, there's a registration process, so you can see if that person is actually registered. You should also see on your invoices from them their allied health number. So they'll have a provider number, not an NDIS number, an allied health number, registration number. So check for that. If it's not on your invoices, it might just be worth having a look now. You could just ask them to put it on, because that's going to make it easier to have their invoices continue to be processed easily.
Lovely. And the other thing I'll just build upon there is, if you're looking to check and you're unsure, you can't find the information, having that conversation and that communication piece with your provider as to whether or not they're registered. Because if you ask the plan manager, we have a lot of providers for a lot of different participants. So we may or may not know if they haven't disclosed it on their invoice. So yeah, definitely having that conversation directly with your provider. If you're running into hurdles, of course, reach out to your support coordinator, or if you're plan manager, if you don't have one, and you can have that conversation with us. But first point of call is always to your provider, just to check if they can add that information if it's not already on your invoice. So really important there. And also, as we said, we're planning ahead. So we're planning for July 1st. It's not in effect until July 1. So just good to start looking at those things now. Now, another hot topic, and I know there's been an article from DSC that we'll pop in the chat box, Justine. I'll invite you to pop that in there now if you'd like. Around group-based supports, there's been some big changes on this front with regards to pricing, Elisa. So we've seen a lot of line items disappear.
We have, and I think disappearing line items is often a good thing. It's like we keep saying we would like to see the NDIS become, or the scheme become less complex, and then we seem every year to add line items. Why have one when you can have 9? But in this instance, they've got the agency's gone the other way. So there's been a huge reduction in line items out of core, mainly around group and centre supports, where they're done in ratios. So there's a lot more detail in that link that we've just popped in the chat box there. If you're listening later, you can check out DSC, Disability Services Consulting, and look at their blog.
We'll pop that link on the replay page for everyone as well.
Perfect.
Easy access.
But what happened before is, let's say the price for a support worker is $58 an hour, for example, if you're 1-to-1. But the price, if you were on a ratio of 1-to-2, was off the top of my head, $38 an hour, something like that. So therefore, the provider is receiving a higher amount, more than $58. So the two amounts together means they were receiving more. End result is that the agency has just got the one price now. So there's no ratio pricing, which means that you're expected to take that hourly rate for the 1-to-1 and divide it by whatever ratio that you're providing, if you are a provider. So if you're providing 1-to-2, that $58 becomes, oh gosh, I really should have had coffee, $26.50, somewhere there. Someone can correct my maths. But basically, it means that even if you have 2 people that you're providing service for, you're still only able to bill at that maximum $58 per hour. Where that's going to hurt is some of these situations where groups are run, and there are a lot of additional costs in running a group, even if you're 1-to-3 or elsewhere. So the DSC article goes through in a lot more detail and steps it through for you. If you're being part of a group, then it's likely that your fees are going to come down, which might be nice as a participant. Will groups continue to be sustainable? Possibly not, and that might be the cost. So it'll be interesting to see if what discussion happens within the community and to the agency in the next few weeks before the price guide is finally finalised.
It definitely will be interesting to see. And I believe there were some other changes around the programs of support. So the NDIA is currently introducing some safeguards in relation to programs of support arrangements. Elisa, I'd love to pick your brains quickly, if you don't mind, around what those changes actually were and what we can kind of expect to see a shift in for group supports.
Yeah, look, Mel, it's always been it had been a tricky space for providers, because in the past, when a provider had block funding, they could take the time to develop a program and deliver a program. Like Secret Agent Society would be a great example. That often comes up, where psychologists are needing to deliver a larger program, or it might be a social skills group or something similar to that, or even a series of autism-specific swimming lessons done in a group. And the challenge, of course, has been that in order to run a 6-week class, for example, or a 6-week group, you need to know that everybody's going to come every week and pay every week. Otherwise, you can't cover your costs. And that's been really challenging for providers. So this program of support is helping, kind of hoping to address that, in that if, as a participant, you'll be able to sign up and say, I'm booking in for this up to 12-week long course. If you don't like it, you aren't committed for the entire thing, but you do need to give 2 weeks notice. So it just gives that provider time to be able to make other arrangements if they need to. A lot of these things do run pretty close to the bone, in terms of funding in them. So, and providers want to be able to provide supports. So this is really going to help, hopefully, for both sides of the equation. It also means, one thing to keep in mind though, is as per all supports, you cannot prepay. So it means that the provider will still not be able to invoice until the support has been delivered. So whether they do that at the end of each week, halfway through, or all at the end, that's entirely up to your provider too.
Fantastic. And look, if we had Smarties for every time we were asked, could I prepay for a program and service like that, then definitely we'd have a lot of Smarties to share with you all. So the other change that we've seen, and this one specifically is in relation to support coordination. So we saw the addition of line items for support coordination added under our core support budget at the start of COVID. And then in our last NDIS Cup question session, we went through a change in wording that we'd seen, where you have to reach out to your LAC or your local area coordinator first. And if they're unable to support you, you then may be able to use your core support funding for support coordination. We've now seen the third change, which is the review date. So a lot of those COVID changes initially were September for review, I believe, Elisa. What's the new review date for support coordination under core?
Yeah, so look, it's a bit disappointing to see a walking back of this space. I think support coordination has such an important role to play within the sector in terms of really helping people unpack and understand their plan and being able to use it effectively. And so I've got to say, I was a bit disappointed to see the walk back on wording a couple of weeks ago. And now to see in this price guide that there's a clear date for reviewing whether the items will stay in core, and that review date is end of June. So this month they're going to review it. So look, right now I wouldn't be surprised if we see those line items removed before the price guide becomes active. I hope that's not the case, and I'm happy to put my hand up to help lobby for it not to be the case, but there's indicators there.
Yeah, look, and I'm definitely with you on that front. There's a lot of that kind of condensing where more line items isn't always better, but in this case, I would have loved to have seen that remain in there longer term. So,
well, it's really about flexibility, isn't it?
It's
coming down to that point, and hopefully, as the scheme continues to mature over the coming months and years, we can see a lot more flexibility. So there's less, I have this box but not that box, and more of, I can actually make decisions about the supports that serve me and that I need. And yeah, I think that will be a good thing. All right.
I think so too. Next topic I'd love to kind of deep dive into a little bit more for everyone, because we get a lot of questions around this and how it works and do I have to pay it and all of these sorts of things. So we're going to go through all of those. Establishment fees. So we've seen a little bit of a shift in an establishment fee, kind of changing around who can or cannot charge, I believe, Elisa. So more providers are eligible to charge under the new guide, I believe.
So what is an establishment fee? Might be a really good spot to
Great
start,
place to start.
because it's this funny thing that you might not know anything about it. Next thing, you get an invoice from your provider with an establishment fee. There's been a line item in core that was always a little bit vague as to exactly who could or couldn't charge it, and when and how, and all the rest of it. And the idea behind it is, if you have a significant core budget where you're going to engage, and I'm speaking from a participant point of view now, going to engage a support provider, then if you're going to engage them for more than 20 hours per month for a minimum of the next 3 months, and then following on, and you've got a service agreement in place, then the first provider that you spoke to could, and sometimes the second one, but it was a little bit vague, could charge you an establishment fee. And the idea, it's not just a ticker box admin fee for them to set up their records and all of those things. It was designed very much for helping you. So if you're the participant, the provider would be able to have take the time to be able to help you with your plan implementation. So to be able to help you look through your plan, understand it, understand how to allocate your funding and to what supports. And obviously you're going to use a lot of their supports, so potentially, and that's kind of expected as part of that process. But it was an amount, I think it's now in the new price guide, $528 and change, $528 and change. It used to be a $500 cap. The good thing is that they've put some clarity in here for everybody, and that's a really healthy thing. So what the price guide says around it now is that that more providers can charge it. In other words, it's not just the first provider that you come to. So you can get that support from other providers as well. You don't necessarily have to agree to paying for it. In other words, just because you're choosing to use a new provider, you may not need that assistance to look at planning out your supports, or you may. It's there if you need it. But it also says that you can only claim it once per provider. So if you have if you've never worked with that provider before and you're going to them for the first time, then that's when the opportunity exists to use that line item and that time with them. For the next plan, they figure, the agency figures that you've kind of got it worked out and you know what you're doing. So it's claimable only once across as many plans as you have with that provider.
Okay, so for clarity, because I know we've had this question before, if I have provider A and provider B, if I go to both of those providers with my first plan, they can both charge me an establishment fee, provided they're meeting the requirements of a minimum 20 hours per month for 3 consecutive months with an agreement. But then when my next plan comes in, neither of them would be able to charge me that fee?
Correct. It's not even necessarily about what plan you're up to. It's that it's the first time that you've taken that plan to that provider. So once per your relationship with that provider would be the best way to put it. But the thing is, it's not a guarantee. Like, you don't have to, as a provider, you don't have to charge it. It's not for basic admin tasks. It's not for setting the person up on the portal or in your own systems. It's really very much about being able to establish and helping the person work out the supports and understand the supports that are best for them. So there's lots of info on the price guide on this if you'd like, if it's an area that you're working in. But also remember, as in all situations, it's about communication. So if you as a participant are starting to engage a new provider and you're going to use a lot of their supports for core supports, then have a conversation with them up front. Just make sure that you've clarified, so you just don't get a surprise at the end.
Yeah, nobody likes one of those random surprises when we get an invoice. Yeah, and I think it's really good just to reiterate that this isn't an admin fee, it's an establishment fee for plan implementation support. So it is actually a service that you're delivering rather than just recouping cost for administration. Very important to note that difference. And I believe Justine's just popped a nice snippet of all of that wording from the NDIS website into the chat box for everyone. We will include a link on the replay page so that you can see all of this information on the agency's site as well. But Elisa, I've saved your favorite topic for next. So we're going to jump into travel because we need to talk about it seemingly every day, if not every time we do one of these sessions. There's been some changes once again, and I'd love to kind of pick your brains on these. We've seen definitely a shift for anyone doing house and yard maintenance or house cleaning activities. So these are effective from July 1, so you can't charge them today. But I believe they can now charge travel and cancellations.
So let's just start with, of course, the definition. Provider travel versus participant transport. So provider travel, that's where a therapist or a service provider, so in this case now, as of this new price guide, July 1, support workers, cleaners, gardeners. We had already had provider travel established for support coordinators a little while ago, which is a good thing. Plan managers now, although don't, probably not going to get too many home visits happening there. But basically, the extension is that people who previously who wouldn't have been able to charge or cover their costs of provider travel can now do so as providers. So if you are a participant using gardener, house cleaner, others, again, communication. If a provider would like to increase their costs, they need to come and talk to you about it. None of this is just automatic. You are a consumer as a participant, and so you can have a conversation and you can shop with your feet. If you're not happy with pricing or you're not happy with any of those services, that's a great thing about the NDIS. You can shop with your feet and you can change providers, find another cleaner, for example.
I really like that you're a consumer. I think it's really good to remember that you're not locked in. Even if you have an agreement, there is always a termination clause. So you do always have that exit opportunity to go and shop around and find a better support or service for yourself or for the loved one that you care for. So
that's right. But look, this is just an addition of if you've negotiated with your provider and it makes sense for you to cover some of their travel costs to get to you, then that's a great thing that is now claimable. You might have somebody that really just meets your needs and they need to travel to get to you. The fact you can now claim that expense is a really good thing. We did have a little bit of a chuckle though about because a lot of services and a lot of supports you're now able to claim non-face-to-face time. And apparently that's also true for cleaning and gardening. So I'm not sure how that works in real life. I did see a bit of a funny meme at the start of COVID with, my cleaner will be working from home. She sent me instructions and a bill. So anyway, we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it's one of those watch this space, and we may see some innovative supports come out of it. But I for one, am also keen to see how that works in. So we'll keep you all updated on that front. Now, Elisa, I believe there was also you did mention there, but just for clarity for everyone, provider travel rule updates. So the non-labour costs. What does that encompass that they can charge for?
Yeah. So Mel, there's two costs that you have when you travel as a provider. One is your time. So you can, obviously, if you're traveling to get to a customer, you're not able to bill that. In the past, that's time you would have been billing if you were working out of your therapy room or out of your office, for example. So you can cover that time. There's no change there. That's our standard 30 up to 30 minutes for standard metro areas and 60 for remote and very remote areas. But the addition here is that some of your mileage cost or your kilometre costs can now be claimed as well. So not just the half an hour travel time, but your non-labour cost. So mileage, parking, tolls, not parking fines, not speeding fines, but those other legitimate ones, yes, can now be claimed.
Definitely. And I'm keen, and I'm just going to throw this one to you. I didn't ask previously. will they have to be on the same invoice in order to be claimed? Or is that a wait and see?
Yeah, look, it's if it's not, it just makes life really tricky because it needs to be related to a support that you're delivering. So yes, but you do need to put them on as separate line items. Don't just bundle it all together as a particular dollar figure. You need to show direct service, travel, travel time, and travel cost.
Fantastic. I think that's really important. And for anyone who's like me and doesn't love invoicing, if you don't want to do it more than once, please put it under line items. It helps everyone in the process. Now, the other thing we've seen under travel, obviously, and there are a lot of kind of switcheroos going on. So we're going to pop a link, and Justine, I'll just invite you to put that into the chat box for everyone now. There's some geographic classification changes. Now, these aren't effective on July 1. They're not coming in until the 1st of October. But we've got some shifts for certain suburbs moving from, say, for instance, MMM5 to MMM6. So if you want to go through, if you feel that they may apply to you, or you just want to be abreast of who's moving where in terms of those classifications, please follow the link in the chat box. We'll also pop it on the replay page for everyone, just so that you can be aware of that. But once again, it's not effective until October 1st this year. So it's not an immediate change, but good to know that that change is coming. Now, Elisa, the next one that's been an ongoing discussion for, I'm going to say, like 18 months plus.
Can I just interrupt really quickly? I've just noticed Denise has popped, and I said I wouldn't read the chat because last time I got lost and I forgot and stopped listening to what you're saying, Mel. But I have just sneakily read the chat a little bit. And Denise has asked a great question: is it 30 minutes there and 30 minutes back? So if you have a look in the price guide, the ruling is it's 30 minutes there, because the assumption is you would then be traveling to your next client and would charge that next client the 30 minutes from client A to client B. However, there is a one-liner in there that says if you are returning to your office from the last client, then you can charge that additional 30 minutes. As always, we would encourage you very strongly to discuss it with your participant first, or with your customer, because you can chew up your funding very quickly with provider travel, and so it's important that if you are going to and needing to and quite legitimately needing to charge for it, that the participant is aware of that and they're not going to be surprised by your invoice. It just makes life work a whole lot easier.
Fantastic, Denise. That is an excellent question. Sorry I missed it. And I'm going to say thank you to Elisa for reading the chat box that she promised not to after last session.
Not looking.
Really, really important clarity there. And as we always say, communication is key. So having that conversation with your customer, in this case, your participant, is really just important to have. Now, if you don't have any more thoughts on this topic of travel, which I know you'd love to move on from, I'm going to pick the next topic that you love even more, which is meal prep and delivery. And we've also popped linen into this conversation as well. So we've had a lot of questions around, can I, can't I, if it's a stated support versus if it's a goal. So we've had some clarity with the new price guide, kind of interim price guide, if we like, that's not in effect till July 1. So there may be changes that we don't know about. We will keep you informed. But at the moment, Elisa, what does it say around accessing meal prep and delivery? Or linen? I'll just say all linen as well.
Yeah, and they're both kind of similar type supports. So I was actually really pleased to see this clarity in the new guide, because it's been really tricky for people, and lots of lots of where you ask the question once of various people within the sector and you get 5 different answers. So the guide has finally stated it really clearly, and I use the word stated on purpose, because what's happened previously is it's sort of the meal preparation. So for those who don't know, is where you basically are paying the component for somebody to prepare the meal for you and possibly to deliver it for you. And so it's not the food cost. Everyday Australians, it's an ordinary living expense that we would pay for cost. But because of disability, you may be needing assistance with meal preparation and having meals delivered to you. Your funding can cover that cost. What had happened in the past is that even though it was a quote required item, often it would people would have raised it in their planning meetings. It'd be mentioned in their planning meetings, mentioned in the plan, but not come in as a stated item. And so it was this really mismatched kind of situation. And so some of the times you could claim for it and the claim would go through, and other times it just wouldn't. So now the agency's been very clear on this space. We're hoping that in practice that's going to look clearer as plans come through. If you require meal prep and delivery, then you must make sure that you request it at review, and you must have it as a stated item in your plan. So stated item means in your plan it'll be written in big letters, stated item. They'll put the item code in and they'll say this amount of money for meal prep, and then you know you've got it, it's for that purpose only, it's allocated, and it'll be able to be claimed under there. The same for linen. And linen is using a laundromat or using a linen washing type service to assist you with clothes and household washing. So again, shipping it out to there and getting it back clean, that type of service. So the good thing here is that, as always, we know our NDIS funding should be used for disability supports, and often some of these things, this is why we don't have that shopping list of what can I, can't I buy. Every person is different. So let's say, for example, that you missed getting meal prep and delivery or linen, and it wasn't something that came up in conversation, you missed it in your plan. It's good to think flexibly. Not everything needs to be just straight down the middle. You can have a think about what other ways could you achieve that same, meet that same need. Like right now we have a customer who's a wheelchair user who happens to have unfortunately injured her shoulder quite significantly, and so she's suddenly in a position where something she could do before, she now can't do. Were she not a wheelchair user, she could possibly still have managed to do cooking and those sorts of things and linen, but now her circumstances have changed, and a combination of injury and disability means that she can't actually perform that task. So she hasn't got that written into her plan. She's simply upping her domestic assistance supports that she's using. She uses a combination of her household cleaner, who also stays and does some additional domestic tasks as well, and support workers to help get on with some of those things that are a genuine disability need for her.
Fantastic. And I love that kind of what we call the flexible thinking hat, if you like, when we see changes like this, which I think is really important for that clarity, because it has been a little bit hit and miss, as you mentioned there, Elisa, as to whether we as a plan manager could put through a claim and it would go through successfully or it would bounce back. And it was kind of Russian roulette for a while there. So hopefully in practice, we'll see a lot more consistency with this. But having that flexible thinking hat around, if it's not stated in your plan, but it's still one of your goals, or you have a change of circumstance in life around Lisa's example there, where you may not be able to do something you could previously due to, say, an injury combined with disability. Thinking about how your support team, so your support workers, how can they assist you? Can you have, and once again, I'm going to say communication, can you have a conversation with them around, can they provide some additional hours to help you with meal prep and those sorts of things, or with doing the linen, and all of those sorts of lines of thinking really will help you access more flexibility from your funding without having to go through plan reviews and all the rigmarole of that early. So I think that's important to have that conversation as well. So Elisa, did you have anything else on meal prep and delivery or linen on that case before we jump on to a couple more questions we've got coming in?
Oh, no, I could have a very interesting discussion about service agreements and GST, but let's leave that for another day.
I think we might save that one for a specific price guide special. So just for everyone's knowledge, we will be doing a focus webinar on the new price guide when it officially comes out, which we will be going through in much deeper detail. And I'm going to chuck Elisa under and say, Elisa's going to join me for that one as we go through. So I think it's really important. As always, though, if you do have any questions, you can always reach out to us. I'll just leave these contact details on the screen for a moment. But Elisa, we had Justine give me some clarity. So I've just popped it in our notes, if you'd like, with regards to allied health. So from the guide, just around who can provide under this support, as we were talking about earlier for therapy, the actual wording is The support must be delivered by a suitably qualified allied health professional. That is word for what the guide says as of today. So we downloaded a new version just in case there were any changes we didn't see a week ago. So, always good to keep on top of that. But what we will do is we'll pop links to everything on the replay page. But Elisa, I just wanted to touch on something that we've seen, and I know you touched on this as well, the idea of having a shopping list of what I can buy, what I can't buy. I know we've talked about it before, but why is it important that we don't have that shopping list right now?
Look, I think it's important long term because, first of all, we're all individuals and everybody's need is different. You may have the same disability diagnosis as somebody else, but it doesn't mean you have the same needs. Each person's situation is unique. And if we simply have to all conform to a standard shopping list of can buy, can't buy, can use this support, can't use that support, that makes life really limited. So people like to use all sorts of different supports in different ways. And for that reason, the whole purpose of NDIS being individualized support, it's a great thing that we don't have it. Where do you get your guidance then? How do you know what you can and can't use your funding for? I know we refer to it very often, but it's that participant guide booklet 3. There's some questions in there. There's a really great little piece on what can I spend my funding on. But the overall guiding point would be your funding is there to bridge the gap between disability and an ordinary life. So the example I used a moment ago of the person who has currently unable to do a lot of her own household tasks, and she's a mum of 2 beautiful girls and a wheelchair user, and she's like, I just want to raise my girls. I just want to be a mum. I just want to be able to do those things. And disability can provide cause some limitations in those space, and that's where her funding, she just uses it in everyday ways, but it makes a huge difference for her world in being able to just get on with life. So it's great that we don't have these pick lists of can and can't, but it is also good to see some further clarity coming through in the price guide. The other thing we'll do, Mel, is we do know that the agency likes to just make a few tweaks along the way and not announce them and not necessarily put them into the document change list. So we will be regularly reviewing any document changes that come through and comparing documents. So next time round, I'm sure we'll have quite a few little wording tweaks and other things to mention, just if history is anything to go by. Often even at 4 p.m. on the day of release, we've seen that come through as well. So yeah, look, it's an interesting space, but I certainly appreciate that we have access that much earlier this year.
Yeah, you and me both, and I'm sure the community is definitely with us on that. And thank you, Elisa, for sharing on that, on the front of why it's actually really great right now and ongoing, just in general, not to have a list of what you can and can't buy. I know we get that question a lot online, and I just want to put it out to everyone. Asking, can I buy this in a group is, particularly in Facebook groups, we see it a lot. It can be helpful and it can be a hindrance. So everyone's circumstance and situation is unique. And it's just as unique as you are as an individual, your circumstances are unique as well. So whilst it's great, and please, by all means, if it interests you and you want to put those questions out, you can, but please do it with anonymity, that you're not giving away personal information with regards to your identity or the identity of the loved one that you managed for. We do have a Facebook community as well, where we see a lot of these conversations coming about, and we help to moderate and guide in that space. So if anyone wants to check it out, the NDIS Plan and Self-Management Facebook community on Facebook, it's free to join. You don't have to be with Plan Tracker. You can just jump on in. Everyone's welcome, and you can join the conversation there. We have lots of great conversations, and we share a lot of great content, including these webinar sessions and replays. So Elisa, I think that's a lot of information for everyone today. And in the interest of everyone's time and the fact that we're going to do a nice deep dive into the prize guide when it comes out, and as Elisa mentioned, we will be going and checking and reviewing and cross-matching to make sure there's no fancy wording tweaks that just slip on in there without any official announcements, as we do often see. We'll be keeping you all informed of this. So Elisa, I just want to say a huge thank you for taking the time, to read more than once the 88 page price guide and keeping us up to date on all of that. Was there anything you'd like to leave us with today?
No, except how great was it for anybody who followed the news in the last few days to see William rescued. You know, I know for many families that one was quite close to home, and those of us that have kids and loved ones who are non-verbal, yeah, amazing. So there are times you look at our community and think, just, yeah, nice to have a good news story in the midst of what is still a pretty crazy world out there right now.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that one, as you rightly said, Elisa, did hit close to home for a lot of families around the country. So we're very glad, and our thoughts and prayers and safety and good health are with the family at this time for returning William home safely. For everyone who's joined us on the webinar here live today or is watching the replay, we thank you so much for your time. We hope you found it valuable. Of course, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to the team at Plan Tracker. You can give us a call on 1-800-549-670 or email the team at hello@plantracker.com.au. And until next time, we hope you all stay safe and well, and we'll see you for another cup of NDIS questions shortly. All right, thanks everyone.